Yuma Tachibana walked aimlessly through the damp night breeze, his steps moving unconsciously forward. It was the usual path home after work. Yet tonight, something felt different. The air seemed heavier than usual. It had been 3 years since his younger sister, Misaki, had fallen into a coma after an accident. Diagnosed as being in a vegetative state, the doctors had told the family, the chances of her waking up are extremely slim. His mother visited the hospital every day, holding Misaki's hand and speaking words of hope. His father, suppressing his emotions, buried himself in work. But Yuma, he could do nothing. If only I could have done more. Even as these thoughts crossed his mind, nothing about his reality would change. Every time he looked at Misaki's unresponsive form in the hospital room, a wave of helplessness engulfed him. To escape it, he wandered the streets alone, avoiding his family's eyes. As he walked through the nighttime streets, something caught his attention. Deep in an alleyway was a door he had never seen before. The door, made of old wood with a golden handle, stood out starkly in the surrounding darkness. A door here? Since when? Normally, he would have passed by without a second thought. But this door seemed to call to him, exuding an inexplicable presence. A small plate reading "Open" hung on it, suggesting the place was in business. Torn between doubt and curiosity, Yuma found himself standing before the door, his hand on the handle. The cold touch felt strangely unreal. When he pushed the door open, warm light spilled out from inside. The interior was dimly lit, filled with antique furnishings. The walls were adorned with vintage clocks and mirrors, while the shelves were packed with leather-bound tomes. The stillness in the room gave the impression that time itself had stopped. "Welcome." A voice broke the silence. Yuma turned toward its source and saw a figure standing behind the counter. The shopkeeper, whose features were strikingly androgynous, wore a white shirt and black vest. Their eyes seemed to hold unfathomable depth. "What kind of shop is this?" Yuma asked hesitantly. The shopkeeper responded calmly, their tone almost mechanical. "This is the store of wishes." At those words, Yuma's eyebrows twitched slightly. The claim seemed unbelievable, yet the strangeness of the space lent an air of credibility. "Are you saying you can grant any wish?" The shopkeeper nodded. "Yes. However, a price must be paid in return." "A price?" Yuma frowned, sensing something ominous in the word price. "Wishes carry weight. By offering a price equal to that weight, the wish can be fulfilled. That is how this shop operates." The detached explanation sounded as though it was measuring everything on a balance. Within Yuma burned an unceasing desire to save Misaki. Compared to that wish, everything else in life seemed insignificant. If you can grant even the greatest of wishes," he murmured, almost to himself. The shopkeeper turned their gaze toward him slowly. "Any wish can be granted, as long as you are prepared to pay the price." Yuma's heart wavered. Could he believe such a story? Was there any guarantee his wish would be granted? And yet, having stepped into this place, he felt he could no longer turn back. "Save my sister." The words left his mouth before he realized it. At that moment, the air in the shop seemed to shift ever so slightly. The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed faintly as they nodded. "Your wish can be granted. However, the price will be your most cherished memory." "My most cherished memory?" Yuma repeated the words. He couldn't immediately grasp the significance of such a price. But if Misaki could be saved, nothing else seemed to matter. If you are prepared to lose it, we can proceed with the transaction. The shopkeeper's words were steady and unflinching. Their calmness pressed the weight of the choice upon Yuma. To give up my most cherished memory? The shopkeeper's words echoed heavily in Yuma's chest. Though he couldn't grasp the full meaning of the price, he felt there was no room for hesitation. If I can save Misaki, nothing else matters. Resolving himself, Yuma met the shopkeeper's cold gaze directly and gave a small nod. Fine. I don't care what happens to my memories. Just save Misaki. The shopkeeper nodded impassively and raised a hand toward Yuma's forehead. At that moment, the light in the store flickered, and his vision was consumed by a brilliant white. When Yuma opened his eyes again, he was standing in a familiar hospital hallway. What was that? Unable to tell if what had happened was a dream or reality, he began to walk. With each step, his heartbeat quickened, and his blood pulsed fiercely through his body. When he reached Misaki's hospital room, he heard a faint voice from the slight crack in the door. Big brother? The sound of that voice made Yuma's hands tremble. He hurriedly opened the door to find Misaki awake, sitting upright on her bed. Misaki! Rushing to her side, he instinctively grasped her hand. Misaki, still trying to understand the situation, looked at her brother with uncertainty. Big brother, what's wrong? Did something happen? No, nothing. Nothing at all. I'm just so glad you've woken up. Though puzzled by his words, Misaki began to smile softly. Seeing her expression, a wave of relief swept over Yuma's heart. Misaki's recovery brought immense joy to the family. Their mother wept as she repeated, Misaki has come back to us, while their father's face crumpled with emotions too deep for words. And yet, deep within, Yuma felt a faint sense of unease. Back at home, there was a moment when Misaki shared memories of their past. She spoke joyfully about their childhood trips to the riverside lined with cherry blossoms, times when the siblings would play together. But as Yuma listened, no images came to mind. You remember, right, big brother? When Misaki asked him. Yuma faltered for a moment before replying. Yeah, I do. But his words lacked conviction. Misaki beamed and continued her story. Yet with every word, Yuma felt a growing cold weight pressing down on him. That night, Yuma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. To save his sister's life, he had given up his most cherished memory. Slowly, the full meaning of that transaction was beginning to dawn on him. My most cherished memory? Was it my past with Misaki? Whenever he tried to recall it, the images remained hazy, like a fogged mirror. The stories Misaki told him were fragmented pieces that didn't fully connect in his mind. This is fine. Misaki is alive, and that's all that matters. He repeated this to himself, but the feeling of loneliness in his heart only grew. It was as if a part of the bond he shared with his sister had been lost forever. As the days passed, the sense of unease within Yuma grew stronger. Every time he faced Misaki, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was the only one left behind. Then one night, Yuma dreamt of the shop's door once again. In the still darkness of his dream, the door stood there, heavy and wooden, its presence imposing. He reached out to grasp the handle, but just as his fingers brushed it, he woke up. The sensation had been so vivid, it didn't feel like a dream. That door again. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Yuma exhaled deeply. As he stared at the emptiness inside him, a thought crept into his mind. Perhaps he needed to return to that shop. The next day, Yuma left home, his feet unconsciously carrying him toward the alley where the door had first appeared. If he wanted to reclaim what he had lost, would he have to make another deal? As that thought crossed his mind, the air around him shifted unexpectedly. There it was, the door, standing silently before him, as if it had been there all along. Yuma stared at the door. What should I do? With the storm of conflict raging inside him, Yuma reached out for the door's handle. A month had passed since Misaki had awakened. Smiles returned to the family, and the peaceful days they had before the accident were gradually coming back. Yet amidst that tranquility, Yuma couldn't shake the feeling that he was left behind, all alone. It was during one of Misaki's casual recollections that Yuma realized what he had lost. The memories of his childhood with her, taken as the price for his wish. Do you remember, big brother? The time we walked along the cherry blossoms by the river? Misaki's cheerful voice carried an innocent joy. The vibrant scene she recalled must have been vivid in her mind. But for Yuma, nothing came to him. His mind desperately scrambled to fill the void left by her words. But it was futile. Yeah, I remember. He responded instinctively, though his voice may not have truly reached her. Misaki's gaze dropped slightly, a hint of sadness in her expression, before she smiled and continued. That's okay. If you've forgotten, we can just go again sometime. Her words felt like a lifeline, yet they also carried a weight that tightened the loneliness in his chest. He alone was cut off from the past. That feeling grew stronger with each passing day, spreading through him like a cold void. One night Yuma dreamed again. He saw a row of cherry blossoms in full bloom, petals dancing in the wind. Misaki's younger self stood there, smiling brightly as she called to him. Hurry up, big brother. Her voice echoed with a warmth he had long forgotten. Yuma reached out instinctively to take her hand, but the image of Misaki in the dream quickly blurred and melted into the darkness. When he woke, an unbearable emptiness filled his chest. Is this what I've lost? It felt as if the loss of his memories had manifested in his dream. If he could somehow regain those memories, perhaps he could share the past with Misaki again. A faint hope began to grow within him. That day, Yuma found himself wandering toward the alley where the door had first appeared. He passed by the spot countless times, but the door showed no sign of reappearing. Still, he couldn't bring himself to leave. If I could go back to that shop just one more time. As that thought crossed his mind, the air around him suddenly shifted. When he raised his gaze, the door stood before him once again. The same heavy wooden door as before. The open sign gently swayed, just as it had the first time. So it's here again. Unable to suppress the pounding in his chest, Yuma stepped toward the door. He grasped the cold handle and slowly pushed it open. Inside, the shop looked exactly as it had before. Welcome. The familiar calm voice drew his attention. He turned to see the same emotionless shopkeeper standing behind the counter. You've returned. The shopkeeper's gaze was fixed on Yuma, unchanging and unreadable. I have questions, Yuma said. The shopkeeper gave a slight nod. This is a place where your wishes can be granted through a transaction. Please, speak your mind. Encouraged by their words, Yuma clenched his fists and began to speak. My memories. Can I get back the memories I lost? The shopkeeper remained expressionless as they answered, their tone as matter-of-fact as ever. It is possible. However, a new price will be required. A price? What would I have to give this time? The shopkeeper tilted their head slightly, pausing for a moment before replying in a heavy, resonant voice. The possibilities of the future you will create. You must offer them in exchange. My future possibilities? To give them up? Yuma repeated the shopkeeper's words, staring at them intently. What exactly does that mean? What do you mean by future possibilities? The shopkeeper held Yuma's gaze for a moment, before answering slowly. It means losing the bonds you would form, the happiness you would achieve, and the potential for growth you would attain in the future. Simply put, your life will cease to progress. My life will stop. As the explanation sank in, a cold fear spread through Yuma's chest. To offer up his future, as the price meant abandoning everything yet to come. It might even affect his relationships with those around him, including Misaki. Yuma was at a loss for words. The shopkeeper, still gazing at him coldly, continued. If you find greater value in recovering your lost memories, then future possibilities should no longer matter to you. However, the choice is entirely yours. This shop merely provides the opportunity to choose. The words were emotionless, devoid of any warmth. In Yuma's mind, future and past swayed like weights on a scale, constantly shifting. That evening, Yuma had dinner with Misaki at home. Her cheerful voice filled the dining table, and their parents seemed to enjoy the warm atmosphere they hadn't felt in some time. Yet, no matter what was said, Yuma couldn't shake the emptiness inside him. After dinner, as Yuma sat in the living room to relax, Misaki quietly sat beside him. Big brother, are you feeling tired today? No, not really. Why? You've seemed a little down lately. Is it because of me? Her concerned voice tightened Yuma's chest. No, it's not you, Misaki. Just having you here, healthy, is more than enough for me. Even as he spoke, the sense of being left behind churned inside him. Unable to share their past, Yuma didn't know how to face her moving forward. Then I'm glad, Misaki said, smiling innocently. I want to make lots of happy memories with you, big brother. So let's do lots of fun things together from now on. Her words struck deeply in Yuma's heart. That night, unable to sleep, Yuma lay awake in bed, thoughts swirling in his mind. He had given up his past for Misaki's future, and now he was considering a deal that might rob her of that very future. If I regain my memories, I could rebuild the bond I once had with her. But each time he closed his eyes, Misaki's innocent smile and the shopkeeper's emotionless voice alternated in his mind. If I sacrifice my future, the past will return. But can I protect Misaki if I make that choice? He questioned himself over and over, unable to find an answer. The next day, Yuma stood before the shop once again. The cold air pressed against him as the wooden door loomed silently in front of him. Is this really the right thing to do? His hand trembled as it gripped the handle. Yet he understood that he had to make a decision here. When he opened the door, the shopkeeper was standing behind the counter, as expressionless as ever. Have you made your decision? At those words, Yuma closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath and spoke. I won't take back my memories. The shopkeeper showed no sign of surprise and nodded calmly. I see. If that is your choice, the transaction will not be completed. I can't sacrifice my future just to recover the past. I want to cherish the time I have with Misaki moving forward. The shopkeeper remained impassive as they replied briefly. Understood. The stillness of the shop seemed to ripple ever so slightly. When a transaction is not completed, this shop leaves nothing behind for you. However, I hope you find value in the future you have chosen. Taking in those words, Yuma quietly left the shop. At home, Misaki greeted him with a bright smile. Welcome back, big brother. Guess what? I found a new sweet shop today. Let's go together sometime. Yeah, sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Yuma didn't know if giving up his past for Misaki's future had been the right decision. But he could only believe that by treasuring the time they would share, he could make up for what was lost. Carrying the resolve to build a new future with Misaki, Yuma took his first step forward. To protect the future, Yuma had chosen to give up his memories. Yet, in exchange for the relief that decision brought, a new unease began to grow within him. Was this truly the right choice? Each time he saw Misaki smile, the pain of losing their shared past pricked at his heart. Their conversations remained warm, and Misaki spoke brightly of the future, just as she had before the accident. Still, Yuma couldn't shake the feeling that he had been left behind somehow. One day, Yuma went shopping with Misaki. As they walked through the bustling shopping district, she gleefully browsed clothes and trinkets. Her profile radiated happiness, and Yuma felt glad, yet also uneasy. Big brother, do you think this would suit me? Misaki turned around, holding up a pale-colored cardigan. Yuma hesitated for a moment before replying. Yeah. I think it looks great. Misaki smiled brightly and returned to exploring the store. Yuma forced a smile as well, but he couldn't ignore the vague, undefined feelings swirling inside him as he watched her back. On the way home, Misaki suddenly began to reminisce. Today was so much fun. Hey, big brother. Do you remember how we used to go shopping like this all the time? Yeah, I do. He agreed reflexively, but that memory didn't exist within him. The more he tried to chase after her words, the more acutely he felt the cold wall of his missing memories. That night, Yuma dreamed again. This time, the vision was the same familiar scene of cherry blossoms. Misaki, younger and full of life, tugged at his hand, her laughter ringing out clearly. It felt like a fragment of a memory brought to life. Come on, big brother, this way. Misaki's voice carried on the wind, but as Yuma moved to follow her, the dream suddenly shifted. The scenery darkened and everything dissolved into nothingness. Again. When he awoke, Yuma clutched his chest, haunted by the fragmented memories in his mind. Were these fleeting glimpses shadows of the past or illusions born of his longing? He couldn't find an answer. The next day, after finishing work, Yuma met Misaki again at the shopping district. After completing their grocery shopping, the two walked home, chatting idly. As they neared their house, Yuma suddenly stopped in his tracks, feeling an inexplicable sense of unease. What's wrong? Misaki turned around, concern in her voice. No, it's nothing. Though he dismissed it, Yuma couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. That night, his dreams changed again. This time, there were no cherry blossoms. Instead, there was only darkness, within which a shifting black shadow hovered. The form was amorphous, writhing endlessly. Who's there? Yuma called out, but there was no response. The shadow grew, spreading and inching closer toward him. The instant fear overtook him. The dream ended. Yuma woke with a start, a heavy sense of dread pressing on his chest. He stared out the window, his thoughts racing. What? is this?" He had no idea why the black shadow had begun to appear in his dreams, nor what connection it might have to reality. But the ominous sense that something was closing in on him grew stronger with every passing moment. Morning came, and Yuma found himself reflecting on the dreams he had been having. The cherry blossoms, Misaki's childhood smile, and the black shadow. He couldn't shake the feeling that these fragments were somehow connected to reality. Yet in the real world, nothing seemed to have changed. Misaki was healthy, and his family appeared to have regained their peaceful routine. Am I just overthinking this? Even as he questioned himself, a quiet unease rippled through his heart. On his way home after work, Yuma once again felt the sensation of being watched. He glanced back over his shoulder, but the bustling crowd of the shopping district stretched endlessly, showing no sign of anything unusual. Is it just my imagination? Still, the feeling of being observed never truly faded. It wasn't until he arrived home and saw Misaki happily watching TV in the living room that the tension in his chest began to ease. "You're home early today, big brother." Misaki turned to him with a cheerful smile, her tone light and carefree. Yuma returned the smile. "Yeah, finished everything early today." Helping with dinner preparations, Yuma gradually calmed his thoughts. However, the quiet unease lurking within his otherwise ordinary life never fully dissipated. That night, Yuma dreamed once more. This time, the black shadow took on a more distinct form, inching closer toward him. "Who are you?" He called out to the shadow, but there was no reply. It writhed ominously, its shape shifting as though it were trying to become human. The instant Yuma felt the faint presence of something within it, he woke up. His chest heaved as he gasped for air, cold sweat trickling down his forehead. The dream had been so vivid that all he could do was sit there, trying to steady his breath. The next morning at breakfast, Yuma noticed a slight change in Misaki. Normally energetic and cheerful, she seemed unusually distant, poking at her food absent-mindedly. "Misaki, are you feeling okay?" Startled, she looked up at him. "Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just a little sleepy." "Sleepy? You went to bed early last night, didn't you?" "Yeah, I think so." She nodded vaguely, but Yuma could see traces of fatigue in her eyes. By midday, Misaki seemed to have regained her usual energy, which gave Yuma some relief. However, her casual remark as they spoke lingered in his mind. "You know, I think I had a weird dream last night." "A dream?" Yuma asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Misaki tilted her head thoughtfully. "Yeah, something black showed up. I don't really remember much, but it was scary." The moment Yuma heard her words, a chill ran through his entire body. The black shadow, her dream and his own were disturbingly aligned. The realization stirred a deep unease within him. That night, Yuma made sure Misaki went to bed early, reassuring her that everything was fine. But he himself couldn't bring himself to sleep. He sat in the living room, lost in thought, as the hours crept by. The black shadow. What is it? The question churned in his mind. Then out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something unusual. Turning to look, he saw it, floating in the darkness outside the window. The door. That door! Yuma stood instinctively, his pulse quickening. The sight of the door's return set off alarm bells in his chest. Slowly he approached it, standing before the familiar wooden frame. The cold night air stung his skin as he reached out for the handle. What will it ask of me this time? Taking a deep breath, Yuma pushed the door open. The shop beyond was just as he remembered, silent and still. At the far end, the shopkeeper stood with their unchanging cold expression. Welcome. The shopkeeper's voice echoed softly through the room, and at that moment, a new resolve began to form in Yuma's heart. Whatever this meant, he had to uncover the truth. With that thought driving him, Yuma stepped forward toward the counter. Ever since the transaction at the mysterious shop, Yuma had carried a vague unease in his chest. The calamity he had taken upon himself was clearly affecting his body. Frequent dizziness, fatigue, and a heavy sensation that seemed to wrap around his head. He knew all of it was the price he had paid. This is fine. This was my choice. Each time he told himself that, an unshakable feeling would rise from deep within. But whenever he saw Misaki smiling happily, he managed to suppress any hint of regret. Big brother, how about we go out somewhere today? Misaki smiled as she called out from the living room, catching Yuma by surprise. It wasn't like her to be so forward in suggesting outings. Since waking from her 2-year coma, thanks to his deal, Misaki had grown even brighter and more proactive than before. Sure, let's go somewhere a bit farther today. At Yuma's suggestion, Misaki nodded with delight. The two of them headed to a riverside park beyond the shopping district. As they walked under the rows of cherry blossoms, Misaki suddenly stopped, gazing around with a nostalgic expression. This place. We came here before, didn't we? Do you remember, big brother? Yuma was momentarily at a loss for words. He tried to trace the memories her voice stirred, but that scene within his mind remained blurred, like a landscape shrouded in mist. Yeah, I remember. Even as he lied, Yuma forced a smile, prioritizing her comfort over the truth. Misaki smiled brightly in response, catching a cherry blossom petal in her hand as she continued to talk. Let's make lots of new memories together. Her words weighed heavily on Yuma's chest. While she looked forward to the future with such hope, he couldn't escape the feeling that his past had been left behind. That night, Yuma once again dreamed of the shop. In the darkness, the familiar wooden door appeared, standing as if beckoning him closer. Am I still missing something? He pushed the door open and was greeted by the unchanged sight of the shop and its keeper. The calm voice echoed even in his dream. Welcome. What is it that you seek? Yuma didn't hesitate to ask. Is Misaki truly safe because of the price I paid? Was that the right choice? The shopkeeper paused briefly before answering in their usual detached tone. The correctness of a choice is shaped by its results. The price exists only to measure the weight of that choice. Whether it was right or not is for you to decide. So, it's up to me. Exactly. The words, cold as they were, struck deeply in Yuma's chest. The responsibility for his decision and its impact on Misaki's future was laid bare before him once more. The next morning, Yuma awoke from the dream and headed for the alley where the door had first appeared. He hoped, against reason, that the door might exist in reality as well. Without hesitation, he made his way there. But all that greeted him was an old, crumbling wall. So, the shop won't appear anymore? He stood there for a while, letting the still air of the alley settle around him. As the wind whispered past, he tried to organize the storm of emotions within his chest. This was the right choice, wasn't it? That question, shaped like doubt, rose from deep within. Yet, almost immediately, a sense of conviction followed. No, it wasn't wrong. I made the choice to protect her, Misaki, and the future. Yuma exhaled softly and turned to walk away. He could only trust in his decision and move forward. That, he realized, was the role he had taken on when he accepted the burden of calamity. The effects of the calamity Yuma had taken upon himself grew stronger by the day. Headaches, fatigue, and a heavy sinking feeling in his chest. He understood these were the price he had paid to protect Misaki. Yet alongside this understanding, a single question lingered in his mind. Is this really the end of my role? Every time he saw Misaki speaking cheerfully about the future, joy would fill his heart. But so too would a sense that something was still missing. Simply taking on the calamity didn't feel like it was enough to truly protect her. That thought gnawed at him. That night, the door appeared in his dream once again. The wooden door floated in the darkness, standing silently as though waiting for him. Is there still another choice to make? When he opened the door, the shopkeeper was there, their calm gaze meeting his. Standing behind the counter, as always, the shopkeeper's voice was devoid of emotion. Welcome. If you have returned, does that mean you seek a new choice? A new choice? The words confused Yuma, but deep in his chest, he felt something awaken. I paid the price, and Misaki is safe. But it doesn't feel like enough. Is there something more I can do? To truly support her? The shopkeeper stared at him for a moment, before responding in a quiet, measured tone. What you sacrificed was a part of your past and future. However, choices are an ongoing process. Depending on your actions moving forward, you can shape a greater future. A greater future? Turning the words over in his mind, Yuma asked. Does that mean I have to make another sacrifice? It is not a sacrifice. It is a choice to awaken the power that lies dormant within you. Dormant power. As a result of taking on the calamity, your soul has undergone a transformation. If you choose to use that power, you can not only eliminate the calamity's effects, but also protect both the target and your own future. However, doing so will require resolve. Resolve? The shopkeeper nodded. To wield this power comes with new responsibilities. It is not only about protecting, it means guiding as well. Yuma fell silent, contemplating the weight of their words. The thought of taking on more responsibility frightened him. Yet he felt that if he truly wanted to protect Misaki and move forward himself, this was the only choice. Understood. I'll use this power. No matter what responsibilities it brings, I'll do what I have to do. The shopkeeper nodded without a change in expression. The transaction is complete. At that moment, the air in the shop shimmered, and a warm light spread through Yuma's chest. The next morning, Yuma awoke to find that the effects of the calamity had completely vanished. His body felt light. The headaches and fatigue were gone. Deep within, he sensed a newfound power. In the living room, Misaki was preparing breakfast. When she turned to him, she smiled brightly. Big brother, let's go somewhere again today. Sounds good. Let's go somewhere far. Yuma responded calmly, his voice carrying a confidence and strength he hadn't felt before. Watching Misaki talk about the future, Yuma reaffirmed his resolve to protect her. With the power he had gained, he would carve out a path for both her future and his own. Choices don't end here. It's through our actions moving forward that we create the true future. Carrying this determination, Yuma took his first step into a new chapter, walking alongside Misaki. Epilogue. Beyond the door. After that, the mysterious shop never appeared again. Yet the memory of the door remained etched within Yuma. To him, it symbolized the weight of choice and responsibility. Yuma had overcome the trials set before him and gained the power to shape his future. No matter what challenges lay ahead, He was prepared to face them. The strange shop had given him what he needed, and vanished. Yuma was certain it existed to teach him the importance of the choices we make. The shop was shrouded in silence. Even after Yuma had left, Elith continued tidying up behind the counter. Her movements were precise and emotionless, a demonstration of efficient and necessary work. This, too, was another intriguing choice, Elith murmured quietly, her gaze drifting toward the rows of ancient books on the shelves. Her voice wasn't directed at anyone in particular. It simply resonated and dissolved into the stillness of the space. Humans are always full of contradictions. They sacrifice to protect what they hold dear. And then, to overcome those sacrifices, they seek new power. Yet that is their strength as well. Elith's fingers brushed over one of the books. Its pages were inscribed with countless words, chronicling the choices made by those who had visited the shop and the results of their decisions. This one in particular left a strong impression, she said with a faint smile. The expression was cold, yet tinged with a subtle sense of satisfaction. He gave up his past to protect the future, and in the end, he chose to wield even greater power. It was as if he instinctively understood the weight of his choices. Elith opened a page of the book, where Yuma's name and the choices he had made were recorded. The record glowed with a vivid light before settling quietly in her hands. What kind of choice will the next one make, I wonder? She turned to a new page, preparing for the next visitor. Her movements were deliberate, yet without waste, as if this ritual had been repeated countless times over the ages. Taking a ring of keys from behind the counter, Elith raised it lightly into the air. A new door materialized at the back of the shop, its surface adorned with patterns unlike any of the previous doors. It signaled the readiness to welcome a new visitor. Human choices are limitless. That's what makes them worth observing. Elith stood before the door and gently placed her hand on the handle. She was certain that beyond it lay a new story filled with endless possibilities. What kind of wish will I hear next? I look forward to it. With those final words, Elith disappeared beyond the door. Silence reclaimed the shop, and until the next visitor arrived, it was as if time itself had paused, leaving behind only a serene stillness.